Portugal in the and yeah, since 1917 we have had a very important war, Second World War, which also was it also changed world history. At the same time, we also see that a lot of things have not changed. This idea that gradually income inequality would become smaller, as propagated by some, that we would have kind of gradually built a harmonious society. That idea has been shattered, and most people nowadays are much more skeptical than a few decades ago, specifically when you compare it to the 1990s, with this idea, Cold War is over, now we're going up towards peace and prosperity. And it was last year that a report said that the 8 richest people in the world had the same amount of wealth as the poorest half of the globe, which is even higher than in the time of Karl Marx and also the time of Lenin. So up to Russia, a short timeline of the revolution. Well, as we know, and has been explained, Russia was a Tsarist monarchy, in fact it was only pulled in the second half of the 19th century into the kind of capitalist world, mostly because of foreign investments and the building of the railways. It can best be compared to the countries we nowadays call the so-called third world countries. Although, at the same time, it also had its imperialist ambitions. It wanted to dominate other countries and nationalities. This Russian bourgeoisie, the free property-owning citizens, had not led their own revolution against Tsarism. On the agrarian plane, there were a lot of unsolved questions, like there were still big landowners, peasants without land. Many nationalities were oppressed. Only about half of the Russian Empire consisted of Russians. The other half were all oppressed minorities without any rights. And at the same time, there started to exist small working class. Just a few percent of the population in the early 20th century was working class in Russia. The big overwhelming majority were peasants. But these were working in kind of the newest, most advanced factories in the west of Russia, because of foreign investment they could kind of import the most modern technique and industry. As explained in the last lead of the Bolshevik party tried to orientate towards them and started to build very small, to build a workers' movement, because there was no workers' movement basically. So they also built the whole workers' movement at that time. The only thing the first big change which prepared the 1917 revolution was the revolution of 1905. It started with basically with a war of Russia against Japan in 1904, and this was executed so badly. The military was utterly corrupt. It was clearly that the corrupt officers, this whole regime of Tsarism, was leading the Russian workers and peasants into big slaughter, and this led to an enormous discontent. And the next year, this discontent led to the revolution of 1905, as has been explained, after the march with a priest for more reforms, was shot upon by the Tsarist army and its repressive apparatus. This strike movement and the setting up of the Soviets led to a big growth of the Bolsheviks. And I think an important lesson we can pull out of this is that the Soviets were kind of spontaneously set up initiatives by the workers themselves. The official workers' parties, neither Bolshevik neither Mensheviks played any role in setting these up. This was a kind of extended strike committee, so a committee of strikers where also other people in the neighborhood and other people who were involved were also put into these committees. Yeah, there existed a situation of dual power, and dual power is a situation at any point in a revolution it exists. There are two apparatuses which have power, and it's a situation which is unstable. Finally, one has to fall, and the other has to win. But yeah, one of the problems with the 1905 revolution was that it was mostly isolated into only the industrial centers. On the countryside, there was not a lot going on over there, and the majority of the population lived there. It was only in the next year, 1906, 1907, that a movement of the peasantry against for land reform started to exist, but it was already too late for them to play a helping role in the 1905 revolution. And after that, there were years of kind of counter-revolution, of reaction of Tsarist regime, and a lot of demoralization. It was only until 1912 when there was a new economic upswing, because there was a crisis of economic crisis as well of Tsarism. It was only in 1912 the new upswing led to kind of a revival of the workers' movement. There was economic growth, and the workers also wanted a share of that. For the next coming years, the workers' movement strengthened. The Bolsheviks themselves strengthened, became the biggest party, in the in the workers' movement of Russia. But as we know, this was cut across by the First World War. Kind of a big conflict between the main imperialist powers, Germany, Britain, France. So Russia was pulled into this conflict. The whole upswing in the labor movement was cut across from the countryside. Nationalistic peasants were moved into the front, and the more advanced layers were kind of drowned in this in this, how do you call it, there's a big wave of patriotism. But it's always experience itself that helps people change their consciousness. Most people don't learn from books or from conversations with Marxists or anarchists or others. It's always the big events that change the consciousness of people, and it is what bigger event is there than a world war, where everything changes, people are killed, and this works as a big catalyst, and it also helped to expose the whole Tsarist regime as completely archaic, rotten, and corrupt. For example, many young men were sent to the front without any good working rifles, and at the same time the officers who were supposed to be there were having their private parties in St. Petersburg with expensive wine. When that you see that these big events have their effects. Wars have their effects on the minds of people, and revolutions, of course, also have their effects. But finally, it was the working class in St. Petersburg which started to protest against the war and against the effects of the war, like the lack of bread, long queues, the high prices. Early 1917 there was a wave of strikes, but it was only on the 8th of March, so International Working Women's Day, as it was called, that there was a demonstration of female workers that demanded bread for the families. and they kind of pulled the men out of the factories, like you're coming with us. It's over now. Yeah, this was the start of a mass movement, and it was repression by the army and the police on a small scale only, because the movement was so big that, yeah, and the army consisted, yeah, mostly of peasants and some workers who also saw that, yeah, we're not going to shoot on these people. They just want bread. They just want a better life. And this is the moment that even the strongest regime that exists, comes to an end, because you can have on paper a lot of police, a big army, secret services, but in the end, when these services, which consist of people, when they refuse to work, then everything collapses. And that's an important lesson, because we see it in every revolution as well. Yeah, so this event is known as the February Revolution, and it led to the again to the revival of the Soviets, of workers and soldiers as well, because this time they also brought the soldiers, mostly peasant soldiers, into the Soviets to have them have a say in the decision making. And yeah, with all the things going on at the front, there were lively debates, and yeah, there was a big politicization taking place. And the SR party, like the more the moderate socialists, who took the lead in it, because the Bolsheviks have in a war been kind of reduced to a more small propaganda group of just, I think in early 1917 there were about 7,000, 8,000. But these Soviets were now led by these more moderate forces, and they chose not to take over power, which they basically had in their hands. It was legitimized by the whole February Revolution. But they chose to support the so-called provisional government, which was set up by remnants of the regime. So something which happens in every revolution. The main kind of head figure, like a president, or in this scenario, the Tsar is overthrown. The rest of the regime blames everything on this person and want to push him aside and initiate some kind of reforms or promise elections in the long term. And what we see is that this provisional government was exactly this, and during its existence, it did not solve any of the main questions of bread, of land reform for the peasants, and it did not it did not end the war, which was demanded by a growing part of the population, especially the peasant soldiers, who were completely done with it. What we also see is that the so-called liberal bourgeoisie, they supported also this provisional government, because they were kind of afraid of the big movement, which led to the Soviets. As Kyle already said in the first lead of you mentioned Trotsky's theory of permanent revolution, and that's exactly this. In countries where capitalism developed late, so mostly outside of the Western Europe, and arose because of foreign investments, there we see that there is not really a kind of property owning free class of citizens, a bourgeoisie like in the West, which is with its own ideology and its own big movement fighting for a democratic republic. But instead of that, we see that where there exists a bourgeoisie, it's often people who are linked to the foreign powers, and also have in their family have links to the landowners. So they're much more linked to the status quo than for example the French bourgeoisie, which got up in action to overthrow the king in 1789. And here we see that this kind of the national democratic reforms or the national democratic revolution can only take place because of the workers leading the rest of the population, in this case the peasants, behind them. And then it's the question: will they stop there, or will they go further and also bring an end to capitalism? In April, we had Vladimir Lenin coming back. The whole famous story about him in a train, which was sent from Germany. They tried to deduce from that he was a German agent. And also that, they apparently gave him money, but in 100 years there's not been a single evidence that they received any money of the Germans. But Lenin did not came as a German agent, but he came to play a role in the Russian Revolution. And for him it was clear that when now this situation arose of dual power between, on the one hand, the Soviets, on the other hand, the provisional government. The only way to kind of solve even the basic tasks of the revolution, even the simple tasks like setting up a republic or land reform, were only possible when the Soviets would take over. And the April thesis, the Aprilstellingen from Lenin are really famous, but still a lot of people who don't really see what the content of it means, because what they're doing, in fact, is not saying that follow us and we take over power. No, they demand that the parties which have the lead in the Soviets, which were kind of the opponents within the movement, the competitors, they demanded that they take over power. So they demanded that the Mensheviks and social revolutionaries who had leadership took over power. And how they did it was they placed demands on them, like, well, you have your nice program, you might not agree on everything, but at least you take over power and finish this provisional government, which is nothing else but some remnants of the old regime. Because otherwise the revolution will be in danger. And what it shows is that instead of kind of very rigid way of applying politics, the Bolsheviks here had very flexible tactics. They were not denouncing their opponents from the sideline, but asking them to do the job. In April there was also the next kind of wave of participation in the revolution, where there were big demonstrations to put pressure on the government to follow up their promises, to end the offensive, the new offensive against Germany. Let's see. And how the regime and the Soviet leadership reacted to this was that they decided to have some of the socialists, moderate socialists, into the kind of a second provisional government, and power, and they were only kind of being used by the old regime. And this led to the Bolsheviks demanding that they would break with the capitalist ministers and take over power themselves. Then around June, July, we see some kind of turning point. So the question is, how much were the Bolsheviks pushing everybody, pulling them the rest behind them? In effect, what we saw was that even a layer of the working class and the soldiers themselves now went into kind of a more radical mode than the Bolsheviks, because they said, no, we're done with it, we're going to be sent to our death into a new offensive, and we just want to end this, and we're just going to arrest this provisional government by force. But it was only like a small layer of the, like the most advanced layers in the cities. It was the machine gun regiment which also demanded this. The Bolsheviks told them not to, to go to in a big demonstration towards the government, but just to have, just have a regular demonstration. But they still went there and tried to take some actions and arresting some people. And in fact, the Bolsheviks went there by telling them to go back home, because they knew that the rest of in the rest of the provinces, the people were not this far as in the city, and there were a lot of illusions in the still in the provisional government and in the Soviet leadership. What we now see is that there's some kind of shift to the right in the whole year 1917, the months of especially of July and August, where there was a lot of propaganda was used against the Bolsheviks, being accused of being German spies who would take over power in some pro-German coup. They were basically forbidden, the presses were smashed, Lenin had to flee to Finland. And they knew this was some kind of period of reaction, and that's something we see even in revolutionary moments, that there are these periods that after some layers want to go further than the rest. There's some kind of a backlash. Another example is, for example, the Egyptian revolution a few years ago, where first was a big movement against Mubarak, and after that, some of the youth wanted to go further, but they were all arrested by the new regime, and they couldn't get the rest of the population behind them, because they still had illusions that there would be some kind of new, better reformed regime taking power. And only in the next years, when we saw the big movement against Mohammed Morsi government, we saw this kind of new offensive of the revolution taking place. But because of the shift to the right of the provisional government, its leader Kerensky, who officially was a moderate socialist, he kind of wanted to take power and take action against the Soviets. He wanted to end the dual power and promise some kind of reforms in the future. And in an accidental way, he got into some kind of conflict with one of the general, Kornilov. And Kornilov was really the type of general of the old regime who wants to put an end to all this chaos and madness, and wants to have the hard hand of order back into society. And so there was a coup attempt by General Kornilov. And this moment, the whole provisional government was being exposed because they did not know what to do, and they even called upon the Bolsheviks to help them, and they re-legalized them. They could come back, and they also, in a certain sense, gave themselves more power to the Soviets. They handed out arms to the Soviets, which were going to set up so-called military revolutionary committees, some kind of committees for the defense, which were in the hands of the Soviets. And so-called the workers were armed in the Red Guards. And a lot of people, Bolsheviks sent a lot of people to the front against Kornilov, a lot of agitators. They had some influence in the railway workers' unions, so they managed to, the railway workers sent, or either blocked the trains or sent them in the wrong direction. So the whole Kornilov coup was over very quickly. and yeah, it was a big failure. And by now, yeah, it was around September 1917, and from there on we see that the old regime has had a big defeat. This situation of dual power is not yet solved, and yeah, all the time the Bolsheviks were saying, take over the power through the Soviets. They were demanding to the other parties. But by now, in St. Petersburg, it's called Petrograd, was renamed Petrograd, and in some other another big towns around the country, they managed to themselves to get elected to the executive of the local Soviets. So they were gaining a lot of influence. They got this influence because of their kind of united front that they were offering all the time. A lot of kind of, you see those on the left, like the most sectarian, ultra-left layers. You would say no, any cooperation, any front, anything with other parties is the wrong way forward. People might might have illusions in some parliamentary left-wing party. Let's just denounce them as traitors. And often this is also called some kind of the Bolshevik mentality, but it was exactly the opposite. They were using these flexible tactics to show, to offer a united front against the Kornilov coup, and because of that, they kind of exposed the rest as being much weaker, and they managed to win in the big towns the majority of the working class and the soldiers. Then. It was decided that a new Soviet Congress was going to be called for October 25, which in the new calendar was 7th November. And the Bolsheviks were clearly going to have a majority now in this Congress. And at the same time, they also knew that the provisional government would not accept would not accept this Congress taking over, and that's when they used the military revolutionary committee to arm the Red Guards for self-defense against the counter-revolution, and also to win over a majority of the soldiers in Petrograd and in some other main towns. There's this whole myth about October Revolution being just a coup d'état. But what we see is that already since the Kornilov coup failed, there is a lot of political debates, discussion going on in the Soviets, people taking over. Locally already some Soviets basically had the power in their own hands. It was only what we know as the October Revolution was indeed a small armed uprising where, in fact, there was almost no resistance of the old guard, because a big majority was won over, and so in the night before the 7th of November, a few fights broke out. The Winter Palace was stormed very easily. And I think in whole of Russia there were only six people that died, mostly because they were at the wrong place at the wrong moment, or were very futilely trying to defend themselves against the big majority. So we see a very smooth taking over, and the next day was the Soviet Congress, in which the Bolsheviks obtained the majority, and they kind of used that to ratify the October Revolution, and to set up a new type of regime based on these Soviets and the Soviet Congress. so that was only then when the dual power situation was ended and power was in the hands of the Soviet. And in the coming days and weeks, and it's also interesting because it shows that the revolution also acts as a catalyst. A revolutionary passed and worked out over agrarian reform. So the old landowners, the lands were divided over the peasantry. Equality of women was into the new constitution. They got all equal rights and the right to divorce. And in the coming years also the right to abortion in 1920. And also workers' control over production was instated in the main industries. And this revolution, which is very important, also spread over to other countries in Europe and in Asia. It had a big effect because they could see that instead of the situation of World War, here it was working class people and peasants that basically ended this kind of war regime and took over themselves. But there was a big difference with other parts of Europe. Now we often say that those revolutions failed because there was no, it was just a Russian thing. In the rest of Europe there was no need of it. But the revolution spread to a few other countries, most importantly Germany, which was kind of also seen by Lenin as the key country in Europe, the most advanced industry, or still the case, and also with a very big workers' movement, and they had the perspective that when the revolution would spread there, that kind of Russia and Germany themselves together would build a federation, and that would kind of win over the rest of Europe and the world to socialism. But there were very important revolutionaries in Germany, like Karl Liebknecht and Rosa Luxemburg, and they certainly played an important role also in this German Revolution of 1918. But they did not build a Bolshevik party like Lenin. They were just more kind of an informal faction in the German party SPD. And because of this, they were less prepared to the events coming. And in Germany, with the tragic case where the SPD kind of was offered the power, because in Germany also the Soviets were it was called Räte, I think, councils. In this case, the SPD took over the councils and then decided to set up the Weimar Republic. We all know how that ended. So we see this kind of the same situation with Weimar Republic, of struggles between revolution and counter-revolution going on, and finally ending with a big counter-revolution in 1933. And in other countries of Europe we see the same. In Italy, the factories were occupied by the workers. They wanted to implement workers' control. And we had the situation where the Italian socialists basically said, well, that's not our issue. It's the issue of the trade unions, and the trade unions said, well, it's not our issue. It's the issue of the Socialist Party. And eventually, the momentum was lost. And in the coming years we see the counter-revolution in the form of Mussolini's fascist organization taking over. And here we see the need for the subjective factor. It's if you don't have a subjective factor, you still have a revolution, but it doesn't mean that it necessarily will succeed. And this whole failure to spread the revolution successfully, in that sense, plus the low technological and cultural level of Russia, made the situation clear for also counter-revolution in Russia. There was this layer of former Tsarist bureaucrats who got more power because they were kind of needed in society. And they infiltrated the states and also later the party. In the party they got behind Stalin, and what we see here is that some kind of political counter-revolution takes place. The regime it did not go back to capitalism. It was only like around the 1990s that Russia went back to capitalism. But we see that a bureaucracy takes over and institutes a regime in which they have privileges on the basis of a planned economy. Also, the idea of socialism in one country was, which was the idea of Joseph Stalin, was not like the traditional strategy of the workers' movement, which is also always internationally minded, but was the strategy of the bureaucracy. Finally, this Stalinism kind of was not just the bureaucracy, the regime, the ideology, but also kind of the whole way in which the communist parties internationally were kind of subjugated to the interests of the bureaucracy. That in fact meant that instead of fighting in a Bolshevik way for revolution, a lot of the communist parties in Europe and Asia were kind of became the tool of the Stalinist bureaucracy. And as Karl already said, this bureaucracy finally killed off all the Bolsheviks in a reign of counter-revolutionary terror. What it shows in the first place is that the revolution cannot stay in one country. It will itself spread to other countries. There is the need of a Bolshevik party or a similar party, which in a flexible way works within the movement. Just to finish. For example, nowadays we see new big movements towards the left in some countries in Europe. For example, the Labour Party in Britain under Jeremy Corbyn has shifted to the left. In France, there is Jean-Luc Mélenchon, who came out of very small numbers, became a serious presidential candidate. There are all movements behind this, and for revolutionaries, for Marxists in general, it's necessary to not only just criticize the weaknesses of this movement, but also be part of it in a positive way. We see how the Bolsheviks worked for the radicals, for all power to the Soviets, when they themselves were a minority. Nowadays Marxists will also support, for example, the election of Jeremy Corbyn, even though we know that on the basis of a reformist program he will get into a big clash with the establishment in Britain, which it's hard for him to be solved. But it is necessary to, as Marxists, to be a tendency within the bigger movement among the youth and the universities, in the student movement, in some cases in the bigger left, and also especially in the trade unions. And this united front is the tactic to, in a positive way, get the majority of the labor movement behind the Marxist program. If that will not happen, then even a revolution in one country can degenerate. Because of the isolation, and also especially in Russia, also because of the low cultural and technological level. Now, of course, we're here in Western Europe. Here we have this kind of lack of technology and the means of production and consumption, like as in Russia. We all have smartphones with 3D printing. We have a problem that there's even too much production, that with a big crisis of overproduction in a certain sense, that there's a lack of new investments, because people, the investors will say there's simply no market for it. So we have the opposite situation, and we should not see this isolation leading to the exactly same situation as in Russia. But on the long term, of course, especially when in a country like the Netherlands something takes place, we would not hold out very long without this movement going to Germany and Belgium, France, and Britain in order to have some kind of strong bloc. So that's the main point. The workers' movement needs an international, and that's also what the Bolsheviks started to build after they came to power, the Communist International. Unfortunately, it became a tool in the hands of the Stalinists. But if you look at the first 4 congresses, you see that there was a lively debate going on, and that's the traditions where we base ourselves on, and that's what we see as the way forward to build now for future development.